Well, good morning. Awesome hearing everybody with so much energy this morning, and awesome just hearing you all worshiping God with all of your might. If you are a guest this morning, my name is Dan, and I want to welcome you here. This is how we like to spend our Sunday mornings. We think it is totally worth your time because we believe that there is a God who loves you despite your past, despite your brokenness. He loves you and wants a relationship with you. We talk about it every week, and we look at God's word for instruction for our daily life. We started a series last week called Killing It, and we're talking about busyness. Our culture is addicted to busyness, that we find excuses for our busyness. We are told that if you have free time, well, you can be more productive because you can still check your phone, still answer your phone, still do business while you're traveling somewhere. It's like we don't know how to just not be busy. And we're almost ashamed if we're not busy. The reason that this is so important to me is because, number one, we're in a busy season right now. We're coming up to the end of the year, these next few months. School just started for some of us with our children and all. This is a crazy time of year, and that's exactly why I want to hit this right now. Because I believe that if we're going to be the best version of who God intended us to be, that being insanely busy with things that don't matter, that's not how He envisioned your life. He envisioned something greater for you, and should I say more simple, that's the best for you. If we're going to be the best version of us, how do we do that? Last week we talked about the impact of busyness on us. We said that busyness really isn't the problem. The perspective is the problem. We have a perspective that nothing will get done unless I do it. It's all about me. And some of us wrestle and struggle with our importance in our job, our identity in our profession, our identity in our roles, even at home. We find everything that we think will fulfill us and sustain us, and we wrap it up in those things. And then when those things are removed, our kids move out, we lose a job, we retire, all of a sudden we're like, what am I supposed to do now? Because so much of us was wrapped up in that. We challenged you to really identify that and begin to change things with that last week. And I hope that was a challenge for you. All of us have to keep this in mind. But today, guess what? We're going to talk about the next thing that busyness impacts. And this one's going to seem very common. It's the one that probably we know the most, and it's how it impacts others around us. This is going to be especially important for those of you who have kids, are married, in a relationship, but it's not just there. For those that may not be in any of those roles, this is just as important for you to understand about yourself and the need you have for relationships and friendship, and putting some priority on that as anybody. That's important for you to catch today. Don't think that this has nothing to do with you. It does. It was 2014, and an Southwest airline was coming in for landing. And it's, if you've been on a flight, everyone gets their seatbelts on, and you just kind of wait. And I'm one of those that gets really anxious. I'm waiting to see how hard of a landing we're going to have. I've been in some that was like, oh my goodness, my heart jumps out and all this. But I've been in others that was that people literally applauded because it was such a good landing. Well, this plane was coming in, and the people were sort of bracing themselves for impact, and they landed, decently hard. But the thing that was weird was all of a sudden the brakes just really started going hard. I mean, people were sort of really being thrown forward because of how hard the pilot was hitting the brakes. And everyone was confused. What's going on? And finally the plane comes to a stop. The captain, as they normally do, comes on overhead and says, well, welcome everybody to Branson, Missouri. The temper's blah, 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 and all this, and does all that stuff they normally do. And then he goes off, and everybody's unbuckling and starting to get their stuff. A few minutes pass by, and all of a sudden the captain comes back on. He says, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I need to let you know that we are actually in Clark, Missouri. Clark, Missouri is about 2 miles from Branson, where they were supposed to be landing. How on earth, and this is not uncommon, how on earth could a plane with all the technology in it have landed at the wrong location? What on earth? Were they not paying attention? Well, the investigation started into this flight as to how on earth did they land 2 miles away. The reason that the brakes were hit so hard was because a normal runway has to be about 7,500 feet long for a big jet to land on. Clark, Missouri's is made for small planes. It was 3,500, half the size. And they had to slam on those brakes or they would have gone over a hill onto the interstate. After the research had been done into this flight and what had happened, well, it was revealed that the pilots, 2 of them who made the mistake, not just one, they had the paper instructions there for how to get to Branson. But another thing that a pilot's supposed to do is once they get the paper instructions, they're supposed to put it into their instrument panel, into the computer, so that if they veer off course, it does a course correction for them or informs them that they are off so that they will land at the right spot. Guess what somebody didn't do? It seems that the pilot decided, you know what? I've flown enough flights. I can wing this. No pun intended. Wow. I'm just going off my brain. You know who I am. I got a lot of experience with this. And because he didn't do what he was supposed to, because he didn't have a course correction, because he didn't do procedure and protocol, they ended up in the wrong location. See, they had the right goal, get to Branson. The problem is they had the wrong course to get there. The wrong projection, if you will, to get there. This is how it is with our busy lives. Busyness, for many of us, and how it impacts others, we oftentimes have a great goal. We have this vision of what things are going to be like if I'm just able to be busy in this season. Man, in 20, 30, 40 years, this is going to look awesome. I'm going to have a great, nice house on the shoreline, and it's going to have, 8,000 bedrooms, and I never have anybody stay there, but whatever, I could say I have a house with 8,000 bedrooms, and I'm just going to play golf every day, or I'm going to get to visit the grandkids and just have them hang out at the house. We have this grand vision of where it is that we want to be, and we call it happily ever after. The problem is when our busyness gets involved, we're starting on a wrong trajectory and a wrong course, and our projection isn't going to land there. We have to figure out if that's truly what we're seeking, as where we're heading for a destination, we better figure out this projection piece. Because if it's off, we're going to end up in the wrong location. With busyness, we oftentimes have a good goal, but we take a wrong course and we have the wrong data. Let me give you another example of this. If today I decide, I bonk my head and I forget how to play guitar, because I do know how. I decide I want to learn how to play guitar. So I go to the local music store and I buy a trombone. And I was like, well, I guess I need some music. And I see some music over there, and I grab the first thing I see, and it's a trumpet, music. And I grab that. And I take them home, and I practice hard using trumpet music and the key that it's in, and a trombone and the key that it's in. And I'm trying to become a guitar player. It sounds crazy, but that is how many of us assume we're going to get to the goal. We do the wrong things. We take the wrong course and use the wrong data to get to some place that we're not projected to get to. And so we're shocked at the end of our life when we didn't end up where we thought we were going to. Busyness has an impact on your family. Busyness has an impact on your friendships. And you need to understand that your busyness is impairing them. If you are so busy that you don't have the time investment for them, they're going to suffer, and you cannot be surprised that you end up where you end up, because you're heading and projecting that direction. Busyness is as damaging to your family and your friendships as is addiction, cultural pressure, and communication problems. I'm not minimizing the horrible effects of addiction in a family. I'm saying that has a very similar thing, that it destroys lives. It destroys relationship. Some of the effects of busyness on our family and our friendships is that we end up with broken relationships. We devoted so much time to our job, to our career, to advancing it, saying, hey, it's going to be great in the future. Man, we're going to have this wonderful future. That our relationships break, and sadly, we don't even notice it until they're broken and they're gone. It ends up in, this is why there's divorce and affairs that sometimes happen, especially in people that are overwhelmingly busy, that they don't even have time to take care of the person that they have a relationship with, or a spouse. Affairs happen because, well, at least they pay attention to me. At least they give me what you're too busy to give me. And so they happen. And divorce happens because you didn't have enough time to be a part of a family. But hey, you had a great career. And so busyness has a great toll of dysfunction on our home. In my years of ministry, one of the ones that I remember that I had to help a family through was that one of the parents traveled constantly for the successful career path that they were on, to the point that for weeks at a time they were gone, months sometimes, traveling, sending the check home, talking about the wonderful future that they had in mind. And at home, things were fracturing. Not just that, but then when the parent would come home, the family had adjusted to what life was like without them. They sort of had their way of doing things. So when this parent came home and assumed to be a parent, it threw off the system because they weren't used to them being there. And now they're coming in as an authority figure, as a parent, and everyone's sort of left reeling as to how do we do this? Dysfunction breaks out. And lastly, one of the effects is we see it pass on from generation to generation. How many times have I seen students be overwhelmingly addicted to busyness because they saw their parents do it, and their parents encouraged them to do it. Fill up your schedule with as much as possible. Do it. Do it. And it passes on. These are the effects of busyness. The response for most people, though, that I point this out to, and maybe you this morning, you're thinking, oh man, this is hitting a little too close to home, Dan. I'm going to send you an angry email this week. Send it to T and Gala at CT Hope, Tom. Okay. Our response most of the time is what we talked about last week. We'll find a way to justify it. We'll find a way to justify and make things right. I don't know if you remember this quote I gave last week. I'll read it, but it was from Henry Cloud. He said that the person who is foolish with their busyness, tries to adjust the truth of the situation so he does not have to adjust to it. So you try to spin it. Well, this is going to be great for us in the future. I just have to sacrifice these few weeks, months, years. Man, can you see that house that we're going to have? Can you see that wonderful future? Just let me deprive you for a season, kids, while I'm building something wonderful ahead for us. We find a way to justify it, like a fool. Here's a little reality check for you, and then we're going to start getting into Scripture. We'll just some challenges for us today, but the reality check, I think, for most of us is once we start our career, roughly estimated, you are going to work for about 40 years, roughly 40. If you're starting at 25 and you have a normal retirement age at 65, or I know that's getting bumped up, but let's just say 40 on average. 40 years. How many years after that are you going to get to enjoy this wonderful, bright future that you're working towards? 15, 20, maybe 25. So you devoted 40 years for a happy half of that. You prioritized work and career over your relationships and your friendships and your family and your spouse because of that 15 to 20 years that I may be too old to actually enjoy moving around and enjoying golf. Or I'm just going to bed at 9 because I'm so tired. Why didn't I invest more into that? Have you thought of that reality check? We're devoting so much of our time, and yet we have so little time. If we don't take advantage of it now, there's only this small sliver of time that we're actually truly that grand future getting to enjoy. See, we have a good goal, an easy life, a happy family, everything's wonderful. But we're on the wrong course. We're consumed with busyness, and we're using wrong data, our superficial, temporary, material focus. My big idea today is that busyness isn't the problem. Your projection is. Your projection is. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to see the movie Hidden Figures, but really good movie. Just got to see it for the first time last year, and just to see how things were for the amount of math that had to be done in physics to do a rocket launch, to figure out all the possible things that they may have to course correct a rocket to get exactly where they want it. And this is at a time with lower technology where computers were just kind of coming around. And you see these wonderful women in this story and how they were significant in NASA and how they were brilliant mathematically in helping them get the right trajectory and the right projection so they would land where they're supposed to be. With busyness, that projection is off. And many times, we don't put enough time into thinking about that projection, what we are doing to get it where it is that we're wanting to go. We have an assumption of where we can go. And yet, if people were to look in our life and see our busyness and our priorities and all of that, they could say, yeah, I don't think you're going to end up there. I'm seeing some fracturing. We have to be real about busyness and its impact on others today. So what does God have to say about this? First off, let me say this. It was incredibly important, as we will see in a minute, that Christians are very committed to family, spouse, even, if you will, friendship and fellowship. We know that's one of the priorities here at this church. It was incredibly important, but it starts at the top. At the leadership of the church, this role called elder, it was emphasized that one of the most important things that an elder could do is be with their family, to be a part of it, not their career, but to be a part of it. You see this in 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 4 through 5. Paul, who writes this to a young man, Timothy, giving instructions on eldership, says this: he must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him. And he must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. And then the side note, if anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? This is a verse that I stand up here as a pastor, is a huge conviction of mine, and I see a lot of pastors who forget this. And I, at times, had to take care of their kids. Pastors' kids who were fractured, and their dad was doing something noble. He was doing ministry, and he was married to it. It was a mistress, almost, to them. And they never took care of home, or they left it up to their spouse to take care of home. One of the qualifications, one of the biggest qualifications that Paul says to Timothy of somebody who's going to lead a church is you better be taking care of your family. You better be managing them well, and that your kids better obey you. Obviously, kids aren't going to obey you all the time. I get that. But it says that you need to have them obey you in a manner that is worthy of respect. If your kids are obeying you out of complete horror, terror, and fear, that isn't a manner of respect. That's a manner of terror and a manner of a broken relationship. And I don't like where that one ends up. But this is a qualification for church leadership. Paul, in effect, says, you know what? You're going to manage the church the way you manage your family. So if you want to manage the church well, if you want to lead the church well and set an example for them, it better be happening at home. If it's not, we're not going to consider you. It was important for this in my own upbringing. My dad, who was an elder at a church that we raised, that I lived in when I was living in West Virginia, in my rebellious years, my father dropped out of his own decision out of leadership of the church. Here he is, this godly man, had so much to offer a church, and the reason that he didn't was he saw how I was living, and as much as he was trying to reach out to me and my rebellion, he did not feel right being in that position because of what was going on at home. This is the respect he had for that position, that he should be setting an example at his very home. But it wasn't just the elders of the church. It wasn't just the leadership in a church. No, Christians themselves were encouraged in taking care of their spouses and their families. A familiar verse to many of us. If you've been in the church a while, Ephesians 5, and we're going to look at verses 25 and 28. One of the things that Paul, again, encourages the church is he says, husbands, love your wives. This was a radical concept, sadly, in this day and age when this was there, because you could just marry and just have a wife. You didn't have to love her. He says, no. You love your wife. You love your wife. Just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for, Christ loved the church so much, he gave up everything for the sole purpose of loving us. Husbands, you better be giving up whatever it is to love your spouse. Wives, you may have to give some up to love your spouse, to be selfless and to sacrifice. And then he goes on in verse 28, he says, in the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. If you were here last week, boy, that really sounds familiar. He who loves his wife loves himself. We talked about this and how you take care of yourself, that we oftentimes don't think about loving ourselves means take care of yourself. That mirrors how you take care of other people. That mirrors how you take care of your family. That means I'm not going to ignore hunger. I'm not going to ignore sleep. I'm not going to ignore all of that. I'm going to take care of myself. I better be taking care of my spouse that way. I better be taking care of my kids that way, that I am selflessly giving up, not looking for my forwarding of my career and my promotion and my paycheck, but I'm willing to lay it down for other people. Those of you that aren't married, don't have kids, same thing. You have the ability to sacrifice, maybe getting ahead, to love on other people. And as we talked about last week, trusting God to be the one that promotes you, not you. And it doesn't end there. The last verse today is from 1 Timothy again, chapter 5, verse 8. It says this, anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. I want to break this down because there's a lot of things in there that may be like, whoa, he did not hold back, and he did not. You have to understand that this is a culture with no retirement plan and no social security. Your parents moved back in with you, and you were to take care of them. Some of you are in the situation where you are taking care of your parents. It's a high calling to do so, and I admire those that do. What a sacrifice. But it says here, if you aren't taking care of them, oh, by the way, your household, your spouse, your children, if you aren't, the key word, providing for them, then you know what? You pretty much deny the faith, and you're worse than an unbeliever. He's making a point here. He's saying, you know what? Even people who are raging atheists, who want nothing to do with Jesus, know you're supposed to provide for your family. If they know it and you're not doing it, what does that say about you? If you're not providing for them, that's not good. Especially in a faith that says, love God, love others. Love God, love others. This is a hard verse. This is a hard verse. Parents, this is a hard verse. Spouses, this is a hard verse for those of us that have friends that we should give time to because they're beneficial relationships to our life. So what does it mean to provide? Well, I have to use the context of a family here for a minute. What are we supposed to provide? I believe that there's several things that we provide for a family. Not just, some people view this and they go to the very easy things, which is the minimum, okay? Oh, I do provide. I get a paycheck there. I'm paying for my kid to go to the best private school in our state. Well, that's great. But I would say that's a minimum, that you're providing the money and the resources for them. But what else would I consider a minimum? Just acknowledging them. Yep, that's my kid. Yep, that's my spouse. Yep, that's my friends. That's an acknowledgement. That really doesn't take a lot of effort, and yet I have unfortunately seen this happen in families. Well, I acknowledged you. Told you you're my wife. I love you. Told you you're my husband. I love you. I told you you're my kids. I drive you to work every day. I don't speak to you. I'm on a work call. But I acknowledge that you're in the car when I say goodbye. And this last one, be physically present. Too many times, and especially in a digital age, and I am convicted often of this, how easy it is to be caught up in a weapon of mass distraction from paying attention to my kids and having to be intentional to put this down because they know, unfortunately, we're living in an age where our kids know that they're competing with a piece of digital equipment invented by Steve Jobs. We're physically present. I'm sitting in the room. And that's the minimum we can give our families and our spouses. What's better than that? What do I think this is really calling us to provide for others? What's expected of us? Love, real love. Not love in word only, but love in action. And some of the ways you see this is through actually paying attention to them, actually listening to them, actually hearing their words instead of being distracted while we do so. How about priority? Does work go around your family schedule, or does family schedule go around your work? How about engagement? Not just hearing them, but actually responding back and asking questions. I think this is provisions that we should be giving family because this is what's deserved. There's a saying that says that the road to hell is paved with what? Good intentions. I see where we're going. By the way, about a year ago, Beth and I went to a wedding in Maryland, and I saw this picture. This was literally a road that we passed. Now, I didn't drive down it because I didn't want my tires to burn up to see if hell was at the end. Okay, sorry. Little levity there. We need that. But I don't know if it was paved. I think it was paved, so yes. So here's the thing, though. We can give the minimum and then be shocked because we're setting up a projection that's not going to end where we think. If you really want to get to that happily ever after, that retirement, that family, the great family relationships, your projection may be off because it may be you're given the minimum. But we should be giving what's expected. In order to do this, something's going to have to suffer. Our career, our aspirations, or our family, our spouse, and our friendships. Something has to lose. And so let me be honest. I think the reasons that we sometimes give priority to our career and our success and our jobs is we get a somewhat immediate payoff. It's a measurable payoff. Do you see the number on my check? Do you see my office? Do you know my title? Do you know the promotion that I just got? We get this immediate ego rush, if you will, of, wow, I'm accomplishing something. I don't know. If you're a parent, do you always get that? No, not always. In fact, whenever you get one, Beth and I joke whenever our kids actually do something, it's like, wow, they actually did what we thought. They were nice to their sibling. We mark it on the calendar. We have a party. We get clowns. It's awesome. Because it seems so rare, we don't get the immediate payoff that a job might. And so it's easy for us to default to the career. Because we get that immediate shot to our ego. And what happens is when we feel unsuccessful at our homes, that becomes the thing that's most important to us, and so we become busy with it. Soren Kierkegaard, who was a Danish philosopher, had just some really fantastic quotes on busyness. But in some of his writings, he says this: of all the ridiculous things, the most ridiculous thing in this world, it seems to me, is to be busy. To be a person who is brisk about their food and brisk about their work. What, I wonder, do these busy folks get done? He goes on to say, you know what? You get busy and you knock out work only to create more work. He says, are you nuts? You're busy for the sake of making yourself busier. And everything else suffers. He says, you know what? Soren eventually comes to a conclusion that he said, busyness is a sign of an unhappy person. One that is trying to escape their own life. Busyness, did you hear that? Busyness is oftentimes a sign of an unhappy person and one that is trying to escape their own life. I'm not successful at home, I'll make myself busy somewhere else. I'm not successful with my wife, I'll make myself busy doing something else. You fill up with other things and you wonder why things ended the way they did. I think we can see why. And busyness is at the heart of it. So how do we correct this course? We choose to cheat. I know I have this down a recommended reading down at the bottom, a book by Andy Stanley, which is fantastic, but we choose to cheat. In order to make things right, in order to course correct maybe a projected path that we are on with our friends, with our family, with our spouse, we are going to have to course correct and get some right data and right projection in this. How do we cheat? Well, here's the reality. When you obsessively make yourself busy with work, you're cheating your family. If you're obsessively focused on your family, you cheat work. If you have an option between those, I can tell you which one's probably going to last a lot longer because a career ends. And if that is your focus, then you're going to get exactly what you're aiming for. But you can choose to cheat your job. And I'm not, by the way, I am not saying, you know what, start taking stuff from your office. That's not this, okay? Start slacking. Not it. Do a good job. Work enthusiastically as unto the Lord. Serve your earthly master as you would the Lord. But I am saying that we know when we're doing too much. And honestly, I think we sometimes trust our own effort, as we talked about last week, more than the Lord's involvement in it. If we're going to choose to cheat, it means that we need to, cheating means to blow off busy and blow off our job at times for the better thing that's going to have a longer term impact our spouse, our kids, and our friends. Cheating means that if your career is making family time impossible, it's time to find a new job. If they won't work with you, what's really worth it? Because if you stick with it, I know where the story ends. Cheating means that you understand God gives promotion and family is a priority, that you have nothing apart from him, as we talked about from Ecclesiastes 3 last week. Cheating means to settle for maybe less tangible, immediate payoff and rush to our success, to have success in the future. That thing that we say we're aiming towards starts now, not in the future. Parents, I have this is one of my Andy quotes that I always remind myself of. Andy Stanley, pastor in Atlanta. Because this one digs at me and I have to remind myself of. Your greatest contribution may not be something you do, but someone you raise. Who cares how big an office, how big a paycheck you have if you lost your family to do it? Your greatest contribution may not be a big office, a big paycheck. Maybe the very person that's in your house and how you raise them. That's going to go way longer than your career. So make it a priority. As I said, for those of you that aren't married, you don't have kids, this is just as much practical to you. You need to find time for you. You need to find time for friends that needs you to be in fellowship and make it a priority. As a single minister for many years for me, the first 6 to 8 years of my life, I was not married and I was not dating. And I thought I was doing this noble cause of working myself to the bone every day at the church office. Man, look at me. Look at what I'm doing. But it came at an expense to myself, and it came at an expense to the relationships and friends, the people that wanted to be my friend or expected me to be their friend. And I had to, before I ever met Beth, I had to begin to start learning to take care of me so I could take care of someone else. And so I began to cut back in my hours and stop being married to my ministry or my career. And I began to find time for people. And what happened is then when I eventually met Beth, all of a sudden, this was a build-in practice to me before I ever met her. It wasn't something that I was like, well, once I find the one, I'm going to change it then. I started the work now. And so it is with you, that you are intentional with your friendships and your relationships. And if you do aspire to be married one day, that you set that practice up now, not then. It's going to be much harder then. My challenge for us this week is to be healthy. What correction needs to be made to your projection? If you were to analyze your life, if you're to analyze the amount of time and put it maybe in a scale, on your own time you can do this, of how much time you are focusing on family and how much time you are focusing on work. Again, work has to be paid attention to. I'm not saying just quit. I'm not. Do your best there. Serve the Lord as you work. But if we're being really honest, how busy are we with our family and our engagement? Are we given the minimum and providing that? Are we given what should be expected? I'm giving you permission this week to cheat your job. It's on video. It'll be on YouTube, and you can point your boss to it. Cheat your job a little bit this week. To spend time with that friend. To spend time with that spouse. To spend time with that child. Cheat your job. Guess what? You can work and work and work all hours of the week, all 168, and you're still going to have work the next week. So since we know we're going to have work the next week, why not do something with our time, apart from being busier to create more busyness? I'll end with this statement by another pastor, Francis Chan, well-known writer, says this: our greatest fear should not be of failure, but of succeeding at things in life that don't really matter. Man, I hope we're successful in our relationships, and the impact that our busyness is having on them, we have to consider. Let's be faithful in providing for others around us. And remember that busyness impacts more than just us. It's everyone around us. Let's pray. Father, this is never a comfortable conversation to have. Because frankly, our world puts such a high priority on people who sacrifice everything for a career or to make an impact in this world. And oftentimes they sacrifice the relationships that will be with them after their career is over, after all the accolades that they received are gone, after people have forgotten who they are and they're just a memory in history. Father, I ask for those that are feeling a little bit of a tug from you today. Maybe it's just to analyze that they're doing okay, and maybe they are. But Father, that you would help us to forever keep this in our minds, that our busyness impacts others. You created us for fellowship, and if all we are fellowshipping with is our laptop and our phone, we're off. And so, Lord, I ask that you would help us to do the faith-growing thing of beginning to cheat whatever it is, cheat the role that we have, cheat the career that we have, the path that we are on, with this false promise of where we think it's going to land. Lord, that we would cheat it so that we would land where we're expecting to land. And Lord, that you would be given the glory through it all, that you would give us that courage, that you would give us the faith that you're going to take care of this. Because the relationships around us are a bigger priority than what we give them. And Father, help us to be happy that though our retirement account may not be as big as we thought it would be, maybe the mansion has 7,000 less bedrooms than what we thought it was at the end of it all. But the one thing we do have is you and the relationships that are most important to us. And Lord, we lay this at your feet and ask it in your name. Amen.